Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And today I am addressing a question that is the title of this video, which is new D&D selling better than expected? Because certain people have tried to make that claim in these last few days based on certain perceptions, but I'll start out. I'm not gonna do like this whole long kind of spoilers thing, making you wait for the answer. The answer is no. Okay. But let's explain why some people think this is the case and why those people are wrong. Okay. So before that, let me point out here we've got 101 Sarmatians. That's my new source book for Baptism of Fire. If you've got Baptism of Fire, you'll really want to check this out because it adds a whole bunch more material, especially if you're playing it in, Poland in the actual setting. But even if not, if you're running like a fantasy game or something, this is full of like great material for characters and houses and situations around medieval nobility. So it's a really exciting book. It's got adventure seeds in it. It's got 101 NPCs, as I pointed out, and it's got a lot of adventure keys within that too, and some other good stuff, including the cult of veneration of saints that existed in Catholic medieval Christianity, and this one specifically has lists of what were the most popular Polish saints at the time and mechanics for how your characters can engage in the veneration of saints. And here we have Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road. Likewise, if you like Sword and Caravan, this is a great book to pick up. This one's almost like a history book because it's a collection of biographies of all the NPCs that are mentioned in Sword and Caravan, of all like historical people with like kind of biographies of their lives. They're statted out. And then it adds to the timeline of Sword and Caravan, or rather fills in the timeline of Sword and Caravan, giving more details of events than there is in the main Sword and Caravan book. And finally, the Old School Companion number 2, a collection of 20-something, I think it's 26 adventures, medieval authentic adventures, if you're running games in whether it's in medieval England or just medieval-ish Greyhawk or something like that. It's got adventures that are all based on medieval history, legend, folklore, and sometimes even things like poems and songs, right? And almost all of them are sandbox-style adventures, and they're well fleshed out, so you should check that out too. And of course, I don't have it yet, but check out the Old School Companion 3, which is out now. It's been out for a few weeks now. It's been selling quite well, and it's a great resource. The thing about the Old School Companions is that the Old School Companion 2 is bigger than Old School Companion 1, and Old School Companion 3 is bigger than Old School Companion 2. So, you're getting a good bang for your buck there. All right. So on to the topic of the night, right? We've got some people have been coming out and saying, see, all of the critics were wrong, and actually D&D is doing great. And what is their argument for this? Well, the first quarter sales report to the stockholders of Hasbro has come out. And in it, it's pointed out that Wizards of the Coast is doing really well. Now, if you have experience with looking at these reports, and I've pretty much been looking at all of them for several years now, at least for as long as I've been noticing talking about D&D on this channel, every single quarterly report talks about how Wizards of the Coast is doing really well. And there's a reason for that. Wizards of the Coast is the only division of Hasbro that is doing really well. Hasbro essentially has been blood-sucking off of Wizards of the Coast for its own survival. All right, it's a disaster in almost every other area. And WotC is the one thing that has actual profitability for them. Okay? That's a bit exaggerated, but it's not too far from the truth. So, when Wizards of the Coast is doing well, which is always, to some degree, there's a breakdown of why it's doing well. And if you'd looked at previous sales reports, previous stockholder reports, Wizards of the Coast had been doing well for Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, right? And it would say so. It would say, oh, Magic the Gathering is our superstar. Magic the Gathering is the superstar, right? And it's been doing for years now, although now there's another superstar. I'll get to that in a second. Magic the Gathering has always been doing quite well. It's a cash cow for Wizards of the Coast. I mean, it's been incredibly successful for all of its lifetime, basically. And, they'll always explain, because we got these new decks out or whatever, right, and this sort of thing, and it's sold super well and it's so fantastic, right? And there have been times, years in the past, now it's quite a few years in the past, that Dungeons and Dragons has done really well, right? Which was mainly at the peak of the 5th edition profitability, right? When it got to as high as it got, let's say. And at that point, they would talk about it, because Wizards of the Coast, the sales of these books have been spectacular and blah, 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 right? And, when something doesn't do well, they don't talk about it. Because here's the thing, they can't lie to their stockholders in this, right? And if they did, there would be huge problems for them in it, right? So this is the one time that Wizards kind of has to tell the truth. Because they could say anything to people on Twitter or something like that. They could say, the D&D Monster Manual 2025 edition is the greatest selling book of all time or something, or the fastest selling book of all time, which is actually what they kind of said. Not the Monster Manual, but I think they said the Player's Handbook was the fastest selling book of all time, which means absolutely nothing. And that doesn't have to be true. But if they're putting something in the stockholder report, it has to be true, right? So how does Wizards or Hasbro or any other company get around that? Well, they want to sell you on the good news and say nothing about the bad news, right? So if there's, if I don't know, let's say if G.I. Joe was selling really well, they're going to tell you, yes, G.I. Joe's selling great and blah, 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 right? And if My Little Pony is not, they just won't talk about My Little Pony. They'll barely mention it, if at all. Right, that sort of thing. So it's the same thing here. What we've seen is that for the last several years, basically from the time Mike Mearls left, Wizards of the Coast was not doing very well. Now, there was an opportunity in that, or rather, D&D was not doing very well, right? And there was an opportunity last year in that Larian Studios did Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 was part of Dungeons & Dragons, so they were saying, Dungeons & Dragons is doing great. It's doing great because of the money that came in from Larian, right? It was doing great because Baldur's Gate 3 was doing great. The books were not doing great. And now, of course, that's basically done. And if you look at the current report, because there were some people who are saying, look at how great WotC did, so obviously D&D is selling really well. No, it's not. I mean, they say so in the report what it is that's selling really well. The first is Magic the Gathering, and the second, which has now been the rising superstar for a few quarters now, is Monopoly Go. Right? And I've never played Monopoly Go. I barely understand what it is, but it's a Monopoly-based app game, right, or computer game, whatever you want to call it, that has apparently been very, very successful. So much so that they're going to be trying to do other stuff, right? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's at some point Dungeons and Dragons Go, right? Like there's Dungeons and Dragons Minecraft, there's all that stuff. And actually that's the one area in which D&D might be doing well in terms of like, that they can merchandise D&D, and that's what they really wanted for at this point, right? They want to have like, I was talking about like D&D plushies, beholder plushies, or things like that, right? Backpacks, D&D fashion, D&D cookbooks. I mean, some of these things are real already, right? Like some of the things I'm talking about have actually already been done by Wizards to varying degrees of success, right? But then also like crossovers, so putting D&D Minecraft was, I guess, an obvious one. So all of that sort of thing can still be profitable for D&D. But the thing we care about as gamers is the RPG itself selling well, or the book selling well. And nowhere in this report do they bring up the books. One thing they do talk about in this report, which is another one of the arguments people have made trying to claim that the new edition of D&D is prospering, is that D&D Beyond has vastly increased its activity over the last few months. And that is, again, one of these statements that could be true while covering up certain details. Now, you remember that not much more than a month ago, in March, looking at D&D Beyond, I had pointed out that there was only, in a video where I erroneously called it Roll20 at one point, everybody corrected me. It was D&D Beyond, right? That I pointed out that, yes, there's a lot of accounts on D&D Beyond, but if you look at how many have actually even bothered to even try to make a character for the new 2025 edition D&D, it's less than 20%. It's like 17% of the D&D Beyond in total accounts are from people making stuff with the newest edition. That means that 80% are not doing it, right? And those 17%, we don't know how many of them are just using the free stuff and making, just trying things out, right? And of course, there are multiple, somebody said, well, there's all these, there's X numbers. I forget exactly what the number was, but it was 17% of the total number, right? Of characters that have been made. But, a lot of people are probably going to make several characters, right? One guy might have made 50 characters on there, and then, there's 100,000 people who haven't made any or whatever, that doesn't mean that the new edition is doing really well. The fact that there's heightened activity on D&D Beyond doesn't necessarily mean anything, apart from the fact that people are using D&D Beyond for gaming, And it doesn't mean that any of that is translating into money for new D&D. The fact is that everything that this current report, this current quarterly report suggests, is that in fact D&D Beyond is not doing great. Because if it was, they would have said in the report, look, D&D Beyond, or not D&D Beyond, sorry, the new edition of D&D, they would have said, look, the new edition of D&D has made X amount in sales, right? They didn't say that. They didn't point out the money. So if they didn't point out the money, it's because they're embarrassed of pointing out the money because the money is pathetically bad. That's the way this whole thing works. So, and nevertheless, there are people going around trying to claim, no, that this vindicates everything. No, it doesn't. It doesn't, right? None of that has to do with the book itself. Now, if you're a fan of D&D merchandising or D&D Minecraft or D&D Go, or if you're a fan of people, using D&D Beyond, then in all of those things, you might be able to say that you're happy for that. But I don't care about that, and I think most of you don't care about that. Most of you care about what's going on with D&D itself. And all the evidence suggests at this time that the new edition is not doing well. They're always going to try to finagle a way to make it seem like it's doing well. They did that for fourth edition, they were claiming that it was doing fantastically well the entire time. And it turned out that it was a disaster from start to finish, right? It was a whatever year, I forget if it lasted for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, but it was, I guess it was about 5. It was a complete money pit for Wizards of the Coast. Because right from the beginning, 2/3 of D&D players quit on them, and there was practically no growth after that. On the contrary, there was decline, And this is the same problem. They're going to be. What this really shows is that by all appearances, it looks like they are going to continue dumping trash on top of trash. They're going to keep filling that money pit to no benefit of themselves, until something radically different happens. I would have to guess at the corporate level of the company, and there would have to be a complete restructuring of the people working there right now, because they are incapable of doing anything. That, or as I've said before, if the company itself licenses out the D&D books themselves, which would probably be the smartest thing they could do at this point, because They do not have the creative talent or the corporate culture to be able to create a competent RPG. They just don't, you know. So basically that's the situation. That's what's going on here. And if you hear people saying otherwise, remember what I've said, what the hints are that are very clear to anyone who knows how to read these things, that in fact, no, Dungeons & Dragons is not doing well. If it had been doing really well, they would have said Dungeons & Dragons is doing really well. It is not. Okay? That's the reality of the situation. So I guess that's everything for today. If you like this video, please like, share it anywhere you think people will find it interesting or get pissed off about it. And be sure to check out all my products, some of these that I've mentioned here, and also the latest issue of the Pundit Files at the Red Room store. It's called High Tech Ruins, and it's a great generator if you're running a space opera game or a sci-fi game or, I don't know, a fantasy sci-fi game or anything like that. It's a generator for creating random complexes, high-tech complexes in, you know, exploring planets that have been in some way or another devastated or abandoned. If you're running a kind of game where something like that could be of use to you, you're going to really like it. So be sure to check it out. It's only $3.50. Just have to get $3.50, and then if you can get someone to give you $3.50, you can purchase High Tech Ruins from the Red Room store. I think the Red Room store is also having a big sale right now because it's their 3rd anniversary, I think, of the site, and so they've got a big discount on a lot of their products too. So while you're buying the Pundit Files, go check out the rest of the Red Room products at their on their website. The links to all of this are in the description of my video. You just have to, you know, expand the More button there in the description, and you'll see all the links. So be sure to check them out. And well, that's about it for me right now. This Sunday, we will be having. It is this Sunday. Yeah, it's this Sunday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. This Sunday, we're going to be having another episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter, and it'll be a very interesting one with an up-and-coming YouTuber, and I'll let you guys know more in the future, in the next couple of days. So be sure to check that out too. All right? That's everything for today. Currently smoking Stanwell Deluxe plus, well, it's down to ashes now, but Argento Roots.